Hello, I'm Jessica Brown, the Early Childhood Special Ed Coordinator for Northern Lights Special Education Cooperative, and I'm going to be recording a short webinar regarding child outcome summaries. And this is sometimes referred to as COS or COSF. COSF stands for Child Outcome Summary Forms. So moving forward into our agenda today, we'll talk about what they are, why we do them, how we do them, some other resources from the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, or ECTA. We'll talk about when we do them, and then we'll leave some opportunity beyond this webinar to do some case studies or work on your own. So what is a COSF or a COS or COS? It is, again, the Child Outcome Summary Form, or a Child Outcome Summary, and it's a process or method to report a child's functioning in 3 areas, and it goes to the Office of Special Education. So every year it's reported in mid-November. We report from the previous year, and the data is compiled by all districts in the state of Minnesota and given to MDE, or the Minnesota Department of Education, and they report it to the feds or the Office of Special Education. And that outcome data is part of our state performance plan. So the state performance plan has several different indicators on how we report progress in our state, and that is one of them. So the Child Outcome Summary process should be a team process, and we are going to incorporate data regarding the child from a variety of different sources. So observations across settings, your ongoing assessment data, or your caregiver reports. And then the next slide is regarding the 3 outcomes that are rated for each child. So when we think of your COSF or your Child Outcome Summary process, we are looking at the child in 3 specific outcomes. The first one is children have positive social emotional skills. Number 2 is children acquire and use knowledge and skills. And number 3 is children use appropriate behaviors to meet their needs. So then this picture, which I'll send to you as well, this PowerPoint, this picture goes to the child outcomes in the ECTA Center. So you can expand these links to look at more about what each of these questions or areas are. But those are the 3 areas that we report on for child outcome summaries. And then moving forward to our next slide. So what does it tell us? What do we use these outcomes to do? So the outcomes happen at different periods, which we'll talk about in a moment, but we're looking at the trajectory of growth. So each child is compared to itself and then compared to age-anchored assessment tools. So it's going to compare each child entrance and exit data. So we're going to look at a couple of different categories. Did the child not improve? Did they improve but not come closer to age expectations? Are they a level near same age peers? Are they comparable to same age peers? Or did they maintain functioning comparable to peers? So you may have a kid who did not approve in outcome 1, but in then outcome 3, they maintain that functioning comparable to their peers. So you may have different scores in those 3 areas, and your trajectory will be different in all 3 areas. And that's fine. Really, what we're looking for is accurate data. And of course, we want children to improve, but we know that given the unique needs of some children, their improvement won't be comparable to same age peers, but they may still improve. So that's something we want to look at and show in that trajectory of growth from those entrance to exit data. Our next slide is a video that I'm not going to play during this training just because YouTube doesn't like that. And if we post it to our website, it won't post because of copyright infringement. So this link is to a video that is about 11 minutes that shows how those calculations happen with the trajectory of growth. So if you want to do a little bit more of a deep dive in terms of how this data is used and how the Office of Special Education uses it, that's a nice resource for you to view. So where to get started? You know why you're doing the COSFs, you know the importance of the accuracy of the data, but then you know the 3 outcome areas, but you're like, where do I go from here? So where you would start would be the crosswalks. And the crosswalks provide the relationship between the skill on your ongoing assessment tool and the outcome. So you know outcome 1, but you're like, what data do I use to put in the outcome 1? So the ECTA Center is a perfect resource. Here are the child instrument crosswalks. So one of our most common ongoing assessment tools in early childhood special ed is the Hawaii Early Learning Profile. So here you'll see that as a crosswalk. So on the Hawaii Early Learning Profile, and I'm going to scroll down and then slide my screen over just a bit, hopefully. Maybe not. Oh, yep, here we go. So you'll see each outcome for the Hawaii Early Learning Profile. So on outcome 1, it tells you what skills in that ongoing assessment are related to that. So outcome 1, which is positive social relationships, on the Hawaii Early Learning Profile, you're going to be looking at each of these strands and substrands. And then the language piece of that also fits into outcome 1. And then in outcome 2, you'll look at all your ongoing assessment information and all of these strands and substrands related to cognitive development, receptive and expressive language, and then some fine and perceptual motor skills, and a little bit of social emotional development, all factor into your rating in outcome 2. And then in your rating in outcome 3, which is takes appropriate action to meet needs, you're again going to use your information on the Hawaii Early Learning Profile, or maybe you have different assessment data and you'll find that in the other instrument crosswalks. So again, the instrument crosswalks takes whatever assessment data you have and determines, does this relate to outcome 1? Does it relate to outcome 2? Does it relate to outcome 3? And so you'll see all of the item assessments that go into outcome 3. And so you'll look at that for the child that you're completing a COSF in and determine their skills in that area. So those are the crosswalks. Again, the information is found at the ECTA Center. Here's a screen capture, but I showed you that live link. And then now you're wondering when you complete those. So we will complete those at entrance to Part C, exit from Part C, and that also might be your entrance to Part B. You'll have entrance to Part B if it's a Part B only kit, and then exit from ECSE. And this is always confusing. It's exiting from early childhood. So this should be done prior to the child's enrollment in K. Even if there is still a DD kiddo in kindergarten, we're looking at our outcome data for early childhood special education. Outcome data for our K-12 world is reported in different ways. So again, this exit is done when they exit our early childhood programs. Next, I'm going to show you this graphic about COSF reporting timelines. It gives you the same information, just in a different format. So again, we want to make sure we can serve the child 6 or more months under Part C or under Part B. So if you have a kid who you're looking at a co-current eval for Part C and Part B, but you're not going to serve them for 6 months in Part C because of their age, then you'll just do that entrance to Part B. Or maybe you have a kid who, it's a referral in spring prior to kindergarten, and they're not going to be served 6 months in early childhood. So those, of course, you're not going to do COSF reportings because we want to look at how much the programs improve child's outcomes. So what the state has decided is if we can't serve a child for more than 6 months, it's not enough time to determine our program quality and are we making a difference on that child's outcomes related to those 3 areas. And we don't feel like we can within that 6-month time frame, hence why we aren't reporting in that time frame. So you'll also get a list from me every November. That's when I report the data, and you'll pull that from your SPED forms files. So really, I always think of COSF as something you want to do as part of your due process work. So when you've done an initial Part C eval, do your COSF reporting when that information is current, when you've just done your ongoing assessment, when you have your evaluation data, because you have the best picture of that child's functioning at that point in time. Same with the entrance to Part B data. So do that when you do that initial Part B. So the first question I think we need to ask ourselves when we begin the child outcome summary process is, does the child ever function in ways that would be considered age appropriate? So again, you're going back to your crosswalk, the help crosswalk here, and you're looking at outcome 1, and you're looking at your help or your other ongoing assessment information. And if the child is 36 months old, you're looking at those items and you're saying to yourself, in social, emotional, and language and expressive, does that child ever function in ways that would be considered age appropriate? And if the answer is no, you're going to be looking at 3, 2, and 1. And if the answer is yes, think of green as go, age appropriate is how I look at it. Anytime there's age appropriate skills, you're going to be looking at 4, 5, 6, or 7. So that's kind of your first question to ask yourself. Does that child ever function in ways that would be considered age appropriate? I'm just going to show you a little tip here that some of our districts do and use because I think it's very helpful. So they take their help crosswalk and they color code it. So all the assessment items that would fall under outcome 1, they color code blue. Or all the items under 2, they would color code pink, red, etc. So finding a system that works for you in terms of how you take your ongoing assessment data and relate it to your crosswalk. Here is another way with the charts that they've color coded. So you can see all the blue color codes here of all the outcome 1. So then they're taking this information and asking themselves, does this child ever function in ways that are age appropriate? Whoops. And then they're going forward in that process. So if your answer is no, think about how delayed that child is. Do they have the immediate foundational skills? So do they have the next below their age level skills? And if they don't, really thinking about those as foundational versus immediate foundational. So I want to go back to my other pictures. So here, 3 would be, if they're functioning at a 36-month level, but you're looking at that ongoing assessment data and they're just 1 below. So I would think about that as, 3. And then 2, they would have some of those skills, but more of them would be immediate foundational. So even lower than their age level and the skills right below that. And then in terms of 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 7 would be they have all age expected skills. 6 is they have some qualitative concerns. So maybe there are some motor tone issues. Maybe there are some behavior issues that impact their performance. Maybe there's some articulation things that impact the qualitative nature of their age expected skills. But they're still all age expected skills. Some of them just have some qualitative concerns. And then 5, I like to think about this as math. So half of this would be 50%. So this is looking at like about 60%. So then you're going to do some math and you're going to determine how many of their skills are age expected. Are more than 50, 60% of their skills age expected? And if so, that would be a 5. But if they're looking at 25% of their skills are age expected, then that would be a 4. And if they don't have any age expected skills, we would be looking at a 3. So just the next step below of their age anchored assessment skills. And then 2, they would have about half of those. So again, thinking about the math in terms of 100%, 50% would be just below their age expected functioning. And then half of them would even be farther below that. And 1 would be immediate foundational. So not all kids are going to be, functioning at a 1 or 2. And you may have some kids, like we said earlier, who in outcome 1 have some really strong skills, and they might be age expected. And then in outcome 2, where there's more cognitive items related to the crosswalk, you'll see some lower age expected functioning. So again, I think it's important to look at each child and the outcome using their ongoing assessment data, and think about these circles as math. Really looking at that age expected functioning or immediate foundational just below their age level. So then I'm going to show you where we do this. So we do this in SPED forms, and I have my pretend Mr. Rogers student here. You'll see the ECSE Child Outcome Summary form right here in this box, and you'll click that, and then each outcome has a page, and then the child information is on this front page. So you'll put what the purpose of the rating is here. If it's entry, exit, or both, then you'll put the criteria with which they qualified here. You'll put the people who are part of their rating scale. And if this rating scale is part of the evaluation, that's fine to put in here too. So maybe your SLP did part of the Hawaii Early Learning Profile, or maybe they did a language sample that you'll use that information to determine as well. You'll have the parents on there because they were part of that evaluation process. And then you can include that here. So received in the team meeting, collected separately, incorporated into assessments. And then this bottom page is going to automatically complete when you go through the questions. So this you don't need to worry about filling out here. So then you'll go to the next page, and it's outcome 1. So you're going to ask yourself that question again. Does the child ever function in ways that would be considered age appropriate? So if you said yes, you'll go to question 2B. And then you'll ask yourself, is the child's functioning age appropriate across all or almost all settings and situations? So determining yes or no, and then moving on to those corresponding next questions. So for this child, we said no, not yet. So we'll go to question 3B. And then this is back to the circles in the math, ratings 4 and 5. Are more skills not age appropriate than age appropriate? Are the skills a mix of age appropriate and non-age appropriate? And so for this child and their rating, we picked a mix of both. And so they're a rating of 5. And then we just did a quick description here. There's no need to get too caught up in the descriptions. We're really just reporting the ratings to the Office of Special Education. So that would be that page. And then you would go through all 3 outcomes using your ongoing assessment data. I really want to stress the importance of having current, accurate data regarding your child's functioning and using that to make these determinations for our kids. So you'll go through those processes in SPED forms. You can finalize that and work through each question. MDE also has another graphic that has been used. I have it in a folder that I'll share with you when I share this presentation in terms of the same questions, just in a different format. I think the more you see this information in different visual ways, it makes more sense. It makes more sense to me the more I look at it as well. So again, really think about filling out your ongoing assessment tool and then determining your outcomes using your crosswalk tool, and really thinking about, does the child ever function in ways that would be considered age appropriate? And if yes, doing the math. If there's 50 items, how many of those 50 items for their age group do they do? Do they do 25%? Do they do 50%? And using those percentages or numbers that they're doing to relate to those pictures to determine their rating. So if 60% of them are age expected, that would be a 5. 25%, 4. So using your data to make the decisions for you and using the math of the data to make the decisions for you, not just determining, your gut instinct, which we know is valuable, but really looking at your assessment information as well. So that is what I have for you today for our child outcome summary form process, or child outcome summary process. One of the things I just want to give you a heads up on, and this is not something that is happening in the future, the soon future for us. So this COSF process that we've talked about is what's called a district determined child outcome summary form, or child outcome summary process. So you're determining as a district early childhood special education teacher, because as the early childhood special education teacher case manager, you're the one who's responsible for that work. But there is a new process that you might hear about, or that some districts might be using, and I just want to make reference to it today. I don't want to scare anyone. I don't want to think we're changing anything soon, because we're not. But it's called the KEP determined ratings. So the state has the kindergarten entry profile assessment tools. So I'm going to show you these here. There are 5 tools that are KEP approved assessment tools: the Core Advantage, Desired Results, Gold, Work Sampling. I'm sorry, 4. Maybe I said 5. There were initially 5 and now they're down to 4. So there is a way that MDE is determining the COSF rating scales using these KEP approved assessment tools. So how that works is there is a data system that the information is reported into. So take, for example, if you're using the Gold, there are maybe 70 items that are reported on that student. So all items in all domains, so all the areas and all the domains for that assessment tool are reported to MDE in that data system 3 times per year. And then that data from that assessment is reported in a Tableau, just an online visual data system, and that is generating a score. So the ratings are generated using that assessment score or tool. So they have to be reported 3 times per year, and then depending on when the child enters or when they exit, there might have to be additional reportings so that they can do the math to generate those scores. So just another thing to be thinking about in the future of how our outcome summary process might be changing, but that currently is not something where we are looking at this point in time. So the district determined way will still always exist, especially for programs who aren't using the KEP approved tools, or for kids who maybe that's not an appropriate tool for due to the unique nature of their disability. So thank you for joining me today in our short child outcome summary process video. I'll share the PowerPoint with you, and there's also just some more resources in terms of the different processes of questions and pictures to go with each outcome that I'll share with you as well. So thank you and have a great day.